Have you ever left a room feeling small, humiliated, or exposed, and not even knowing why? That tightness in your chest, that sinking thought that maybe, just maybe, everyone noticed something you didn't intend to show. That was no accident. That moment wasn't random. That was the world marking you, sizing you up, measuring exactly how much you were willing to give away without resistance. And here's the brutal truth. Every day, in every public space, you are teaching people how to treat you. You were never warned about this. Nobody handed you the instruction manual for the social battlefield. Instead, you were raised with vague notions of politeness, kindness, patience, the belief that smiling and saying the right thing will protect you. It doesn't. Those habits make you transparent. They broadcast vulnerability. They whisper to predators in plain sight, "Here, take what you want. I won't resist." Most people live their lives blind to this. They think public mistakes are minor. They think small embarrassments don't matter. But human psychology does not work that way. Every gesture, every tone, every hesitation sends signals. Signals of confidence, signals of weakness, signals of availability. And the world responds. It rewards confidence. It punishes predictability. It exploits kindness when it comes without boundaries. Let me be clear. I am not talking about the obvious textbook mistakes. I am not talking about dropping your coffee in front of strangers or tripping on the sidewalk. I am talking about the subtle, seemingly innocent things you do. Small social missteps, little overshares, soft voices, hesitant actions that silently shift power to others almost imperceptibly. Those are the things that mark you as an easy target. And once someone marks you, the game begins. Think of it like this. Every room is a map. Every social interaction is a terrain. Some people enter as explorers, learning the lay of the land. Others are hunters, silently observing patterns, identifying weak points. If you do not understand the rules, if you do not control your own signals, you're laying down markers for them to exploit. And the more predictable you are, the more precise their strike can be. The first public mistake is deceptively simple: hesitation. The pause before you speak, the "I'm sorry" you utter when no apology is necessary, the reluctance to assert your presence, these are invisible invitations. When you hesitate, the room notices. Not consciously, maybe, but unconsciously, everyone feels it. Predators, manipulators, those who feed on uncertainty, they smell it immediately. Hesitation broadcasts doubt. Doubt broadcasts weakness. Weakness draws attention, not admiration. You might think hesitation is harmless. You think it is humility. You think it is the polite way to navigate the world. But polite hesitation does not protect you. Polite hesitation tells others what you value, that their approval matters more than your own presence, that their judgment outweighs your right to space. And when you signal this, power shifts. The person who understands human behavior knows to act next. The one who waits too long becomes a target, and targets are never neutral. They are leveraged. The second mistake is oversharing. The urge to explain yourself, to justify your actions, to make sure everyone understands your intentions. It seems human. It seems reasonable. It seems like good communication. But in public, oversharing is a currency you hand over without negotiation. Every detail you reveal about your fears, doubts, or private life is ammunition for someone else. They may use it consciously, they may not. But in some way, it becomes part of the narrative they control about you. When you overshare, the world begins to write your story for you. And often, the version others write is not flattering. It is a version that highlights vulnerability, that amplifies uncertainty, that frames you as predictable, manageable, and ultimately controllable. Publicly, oversharing is a mistake because people are constantly measuring, categorizing, and predicting. They are assessing your boundaries, your responses, your willingness to defend yourself. Oversharing lowers your defenses before anyone has to push. The third mistake is pleasing too much. The inclination to smile, to nod, to agree, to go along with things you internally oppose is one of the most common and destructive patterns in public life. People think being agreeable makes them liked, and in some superficial sense it does, but it comes at a steep cost. Agreeable people are rarely respected. They're tolerated, observed, and often quietly exploited. When you overplease, when you adapt your responses to reduce tension or gain approval, you teach the world exactly what you're worth. Negotiable. And negotiable is never powerful. In fact, negotiable is what predators look for. They observe, they test, and they measure. How far will this person go to avoid conflict? How much will they give up to maintain surface harmony? And every answer they gather informs their next move. Another subtle trap is ignoring social cues. Public life is a game of signals. Not the signals you intend, but the signals you send and the ones you read from others. Ignoring cues, whether out of distraction or naivety, is dangerous. It signals either arrogance or cluelessness, either of which invites interference. A smirk you don't catch, a remark you fail to respond to, a subtle slight you miss. These accumulate. They become a map for someone else to navigate your boundaries and exploit them. And there's underestimating observation. You may feel invisible. You may feel the room doesn't notice your gestures or reactions. You are wrong. People notice everything, even when they are polite, even when they are kind, even when they appear indifferent. Someone is always learning. They are learning how you react to pressure, how you respond to judgment, how you manage embarrassment. These are the lessons they will use later, sometimes years later, to predict and manipulate you. Public mistakes are amplified by internal misalignment. When your actions do not match your intentions, others see the mismatch instantly. You may think your polite smile communicates agreement, but internally you feel irritation. You may think your nod signals confidence, but internally you feel hesitation. The moment there is a mismatch between your internal state and your external expression, the room senses it. They feel it. And those who are attuned to human behavior act accordingly. Now, consider the cumulative effect. One hesitation here, one overshare there, one overpleasing gesture, ignored cue, misaligned action. Lone, minor. Together, a pattern emerges. A pattern that tells the world this person can be influenced, manipulated, controlled. Every public mistake is a breadcrumb leading others directly to your vulnerabilities. And if you continue without awareness, you continue to feed them unknowingly every day. You might ask, but how do I stop? The answer is deceptively simple and brutally honest. Awareness first, strategy second. You must observe yourself as though you are already under scrutiny, because, in fact, you are. You must measure every gesture, every word, every pause as though it has weight, and it does. You must understand that in public, your presence is a signal, and every signal is read. And yet, there is hope. Understanding these patterns does not make you cold or detached. It makes you solid. It makes you untouchable. It allows you to navigate public spaces without giving away power. It allows you to participate without being prey. Because once you know the rules, once you see the invisible map, the invisible hunters become just another part of the landscape, something you move through with precision and intent rather than stumble into blindly. This is the first step. Recognize that public life is a game. Recognize that small actions matter. Recognize that hesitation, oversharing, overpleasing, ignoring cues, and internal misalignment are not just mistakes. They are invitations. And once you see them for what they are, you can begin to act differently, to exist differently, to reclaim the space that is yours. The 9 things I will reveal are not arbitrary. They are the fundamental behaviors that invite manipulation, disrespect, and loss of control. And they are behaviors so ingrained, so normalized, that most people never even see them in themselves. They are habits that must be unlearned before you can operate in public with authority, confidence, and invulnerability. For now, remember this. Every public space is a mirror, reflecting not just the world, but your own habits back at you. The moment you see what the mirror shows, hesitation, oversharing, overpleasing, you take the first step toward changing it. The moment you realize that every gesture, every tone, every pause is being watched, measured, and interpreted, you step into control. And control is power. This is where your journey begins. You're about to learn what you should never do in public, not to appear perfect, not to conform, but to survive, thrive, and become untouchable in a world that rewards precision, awareness, and calculated presence. Ignore these lessons at your own peril, because the world does not wait for the naive, the kind, or the unaware. It acts on them. It exploits them. And until you see it clearly, you are still part of the game you think you're merely observing. Now that you understand the battlefield, it's time to see the traps more clearly. These 9 things, these seemingly minor missteps, are not abstract theories. They are real behaviors you practice every day, often without realizing it, and every day they weaken your presence, your power, and your influence. Let's begin with one of the most overlooked but most damaging: apologizing too often. Apologies are meant to repair, to reconcile, to show awareness. But in public, over-apologizing does the opposite. It broadcasts uncertainty. It screams, I am unsure, I am fragile, I am malleable. The world does not reward fragility. It exploits it. Every unnecessary I'm sorry you utter tells observers your energy is negotiable, your peace is purchasable, your dignity is optional. Consider a crowded space, a coffee shop, a meeting, a street corner. Someone bumps into you, not aggressively, not maliciously, just casually, and you mutter an apology, one tiny word. But in that micro moment, you reveal more than manners. You reveal the threshold of your boundaries. Observers notice, predators notice, and they make a mental note. This person can be influenced, pressured, or manipulated without a fight. The second trap is constant explanation, the compulsion to justify yourself, to clarify your intentions, to narrate your actions. This is social suicide in subtle form. Public spaces are arenas, and explanations are confessions. Every time you explain, you give away insight into your mind. You reveal your fears, your doubts, your hesitations. People don't need to know this. They only need to know that you are readable, and once readable, you are controllable. People often think that explaining themselves is a sign of strength or rationality. In reality, it signals the opposite. It signals insecurity, a need for validation, and willingness to negotiate your stance. The world's predators, both literal and figurative, sense this immediately. They do not approach the confident, the unreadable, the unyielding. They approach those whose minds are transparent, whose reactions are predictable, whose approval is sought, but never fully earned. Third, constant overpleasing. The habit of bending to others' desires, agreeing when you secretly disagree, smiling when you want to frown, accommodating when your gut screams otherwise. This is perhaps the subtlest yet most corrosive habit of all. Public life is a stage, and overpleasers hand the script to everyone else. They make themselves secondary actors in their own story. You think overpleasing is harmless. You think it's socially adaptive, polite, or necessary, but each act of accommodation reinforces a pattern. Your boundaries are optional, your preferences disposable, your voice negotiable, and once someone recognizes this, they exploit it. The subtle nods, the easy concessions, the silent agreements, they become a roadmap for manipulation. Your kindness becomes the very weapon others use to control you. Next, oversharing in subtle ways. Not every detail needs to be public. Not every thought needs to be voiced. Yet in crowded spaces, people spill their minds without thinking. A passing complaint, a fleeting doubt, a whispered fear. These are small cracks in the armor, unnoticed perhaps by the speaker, but magnified by everyone watching. Humans are wired to detect vulnerability, and your oversharing signals availability, predictability, and compliance. The fifth trap is disguised defensiveness. You think you're protecting yourself when you correct, justify, or explain. But defensiveness is visible. It is loud in subtle tones, in tight smiles, in raised eyebrows. In public, it reads as insecurity, not authority. People see the tension. They measure the distance between your words and your confidence. And when they sense it, they test it. They probe it. They push until your limits are revealed. The sixth thing is ignoring subtle social cues. Public spaces are a web of micro-expressions, gestures, and unspoken rules. A glance that lingers too long, a smirk that goes unchecked, a gesture that doesn't match words. All of these are signals. Ignoring them isn't neutrality, it's surrender. It tells the world you're not fully present, not fully aware, and therefore manipulable. Someone, somewhere, always notices, always learns, always remembers. The seventh trap is projecting your inner chaos. Internal misalignment, the disconnect between your private thoughts and your public persona, is lethal in social interactions. You may believe that hiding anxiety, irritation, or doubt is sufficient. But internal chaos leaks. A frown, a twitch, a hesitation, micro-signals that transmit your inner state like a broadcast. Observers register these inconsistencies instantly. They do not forgive them. They leverage them. Next comes reacting too quickly. Impulse is a silent marker of vulnerability. Reacting to minor slights, to passing judgments, to fleeting irritations. This is an invitation. It tells the world your emotional state is readable, your temper is accessible, your discomfort is predictable. Public life rewards measured responses. It punishes reactive ones. Every hasty reaction is a breadcrumb trail for manipulation. Finally, failing to claim your space, literally and figuratively. Public spaces are psychological territories. Standing firmly, speaking clearly, moving decisively, these are declarations of presence. Failing to do them signals ambiguity, indecision, and pliability. People respect space when it is claimed, and they exploit it when it is surrendered. Each unclaimed inch, each hesitant word, each timid gesture adds up to a blueprint for how others will treat you. Now, understand this. These 9 behaviors are universal. They do not discriminate. They exist in coffee shops, boardrooms, streets, buses, elevators, even virtual spaces. Every public interaction is an opportunity for someone to exploit them. And the more unaware you are, the more predictable you become. But here is the counterbalance. Awareness is a weapon. Observing your habits, noticing your patterns, identifying the subtle mistakes you make, this transforms vulnerability into armor. This is where power begins, not by aggressing, not by dominating, not by overpowering others, but by controlling your signals, calibrating your presence, mastering the art of public navigation. When you internalize this knowledge, public life changes. Every room becomes a map. Every conversation becomes a strategic engagement. Every gesture, every pause, every word is chosen intentionally. You are no longer a passive actor in the narrative others write about you. You are the author of your own presence. The lesson is simple, but rarely practiced. Do not apologize unnecessarily. Do not over-explain. Do not over-please. Do not overshare. Do not mask internal chaos. Do not react impulsively. Do not ignore cues, and always claim your space. These are the invisible rules. Break them, and you give power away. Follow them, and you reclaim it. Public mistakes are not trivial. They accumulate. They define you. They teach others what you tolerate and what you fear. But understanding them, seeing them clearly, internalizing them, this is liberation. This is authority. This is invisibility in plain sight. And remember this, the world does not need your permission to exploit your mistakes. It will take advantage without hesitation, without conscience, without pause. The question is whether you will continue to hand it to them or whether you will step into control. The 9 things you should never do in public are not rules of etiquette. They are rules of survival. They are the difference between being invisible and being prey, between being respected and being manipulated, between leaving a room standing tall or leaving it diminished. Now, take a moment and look around. Observe yourself in public. Notice the hesitations, the explanations, the smiles that are too fast, the apologies that are too easy. This is not shame. This is awareness. And awareness is the first step toward mastery. Because once you see it clearly, you can act differently. Once you act differently, you can exist differently. Once you exist differently, you are untouchable. This is the path, and it begins now. Once you've recognized the traps, the apologies, the explanations, the oversharing, the subtle signs of weakness, you begin to notice the invisible currents that run through public spaces. Every interaction, no matter how small, carries weight. Every glance, every word, every gesture is a signal that others read faster than you think. And if you are untrained, if you are unaware, those signals are interpreted as permission. Permission to push, to test, to manipulate. Take a crowded subway car, for example. You think you're merely existing, merely commuting, but subtle observations occur constantly. The person across from you notices how you shift uncomfortably when someone leans too close. The stranger next to you notices how quickly you move to apologize when bumped. The onlooker sees the polite smile you offer when someone cuts in line. Each of these small acts seems insignificant, harmless even, but together they build a map that shows exactly where you bend, where you yield, where you hesitate. And predators, emotional, manipulative, opportunistic humans, are always reading. They are trained, either by experience or instinct, to detect weakness in patterns. They do not need loud signals. They thrive on subtlety. A flicker of doubt, a quiet hesitation, a soft-spoken apology. They notice it all. And then, almost imperceptibly, they begin to test the boundaries. The first test is often a microaggression, a comment, a critique, a veiled insult presented in a tone designed to disarm you. It is almost invisible to others but sharp to you. Your reaction, or lack of one, tells them everything. Do you defend yourself? Do you retreat? Do you explain? Every option, every choice teaches them more about how you can be influenced. This is why self-awareness in public is crucial. Not awareness for the sake of pride, but awareness for survival. Each public space is a social laboratory. Each interaction is an experiment. And if you are unconscious, if you are reactive, you are the test subject every single time. The second mistake many make is oversharing emotions in public. There is a misconception that vulnerability is admirable, that honesty about your fears, your insecurities, your frustrations is virtuous. It is, within private spaces, with trusted allies, in controlled environments. But public vulnerability is a form of transparency that predatory minds exploit. When you reveal internal states publicly, you broadcast the coordinates of your emotional landscape. Others can navigate it. Others can exploit it. Others can manipulate it. Consider the person who sighs loudly in a queue when someone cuts in line, or the employee who lets frustration slip during a meeting, or the commuter who mumbles complaints to themselves in a public park. Each act seems small. Each act seems harmless. But each act is a signal, a map, a blueprint of your tolerances and triggers. And those paying attention, always someone, is taking notes. The third subtle error is reacting impulsively to minor provocations. A sharp word, a dismissive glance, a minor injustice, reacting instantly is like sending out a flare that reads, "I am accessible, I am touchable, I am readable." Power in public is rarely about confrontation. Power is about control, about measured responses, about managing perception. Reacting too quickly reveals the inner workings of your mind. It gives others the insight they need to manipulate outcomes. The fourth trap is failing to assert personal space, both physically and psychologically. Standing too close to strangers, yielding too easily in line, allowing interruptions in conversation. These are not minor lapses. They are cues. They are signals that your presence is negotiable, that your boundaries are flexible, that your energy is not yours alone. Public life rewards presence and authority, even in subtle forms. Failing to claim space signals the opposite. Fifth, the illusion of neutrality. Many believe that blending in, staying quiet, avoiding offense, and remaining neutral is a form of safety. It is not. Neutrality is often perceived as weakness. People read silence as indecision, hesitation as vulnerability, invisibility as availability. The predator does not require provocation. They merely require absence of resistance. Your neutrality is a stage, and they perform on it. Sixth, misjudging the balance between visibility and invisibility. There is a paradox in public behavior. Being seen too little invites exploitation. being seen too much invites judgment. The key is calibration, not hiding, not dominating, but being strategically present, observing, listening, choosing your moments. The unreadable, the deliberate, the calculated presence. This is Arma. It is not arrogance. It is awareness. The seventh public error is attempting to be liked over being respected. The desire to be liked is human. We all crave acceptance, but public spaces are not therapeutic zones. They are arenas of observation. Being liked is temporary. Being respected is lasting. People who seek to please everyone expose themselves to manipulation. People who act with quiet authority, who maintain their values regardless of applause, are the ones who influence outcomes and control interactions. Eighth, ignoring the weight of nonverbal signals, tone, posture, eye contact, gestures. These are the languages of power. You may be speaking carefully, saying all the right words, following etiquette, but your body language tells a different story. Nervous twitches, rushed movements, avoidance of eye contact. These betray confidence, and others, consciously or unconsciously, respond to these signals with either respect or exploitation. Finally, underestimating observation. Public spaces are constantly monitored, not just by cameras, but by human perception. Every action is noted, every reaction cataloged. Even those you consider strangers carry information about you, consciously or not. They remember your hesitations, your apologetic tone, your impulsive reactions, your unclaimed space. This information shapes how you are treated in future interactions. Awareness is not paranoia, it is survival. When these errors combine, the result is predictable. You become a target, not because you're weak, not because you're flawed, but because you're readable, because you have taught the world how to treat you through repeated patterns of behavior. And once these patterns are recognized, once they're cataloged, once they're understood, they are exploited. The good news? Awareness transforms vulnerability into armor. When you understand these 9 mistakes and internalize the patterns, you begin to act differently. You no longer apologize without cause. You no longer over-explain. You no longer overshare. You react deliberately, assert space with subtle authority, calibrate your presence, and maintain control of perception. You learn to walk in public as though every interaction matters, because it does. Because it is not just public, it is personal. Your posture, your tone, your responses, your silences, they define how others will treat you, whether they respect you, whether they test you, whether they attempt to manipulate you. Every step is a declaration. You are not merely present. You are formidable. And then, once you practice these principles, something extraordinary happens. The traps no longer exist. The predators no longer notice. The small manipulations, the veiled provocations, the subtle tests, they no longer reach you. You move through spaces unseen but commanding. Observers feel your authority even if they cannot define it. Others respect the unspoken rules you establish simply by existing with awareness. Public life stops being a battlefield. It becomes a landscape of mastery. Every conversation is a calculated exchange. Every glance is a message. Every pause is intentional. You are no longer a passive participant. You are the author of your presence, the invisible strategist, the quiet authority that others unconsciously follow. And this is the ultimate truth. Mastery is not aggression. It is not domination. It is not confrontation. It is control over yourself, over your presence, over the narrative others construct about you. Once you internalize the 9 mistakes, once you see the traps, once you act with awareness, public spaces no longer have the power to wound. They have the power to witness. And you, the aware, the deliberate, the strategic, you walk among them untouchable. You think public spaces are neutral, that the world outside your door is a random collection of faces, voices, and movements. But the truth is more precise, more calculated. Every public interaction is a reflection, a test, a subtle negotiation of power. And the moment you ignore this, the moment you assume that civility protects you, you make the same mistake again and again. There is a principle most people overlook. People respond not to what you say, but to what you allow them to perceive. This is the invisible law that governs every public encounter. When you shrug off a slight, smile at an insult, or apologize unnecessarily, you're not merely being polite. You're teaching. You're offering a blueprint of your limits, your tolerance, your thresholds. And someone, somewhere, is always watching, always learning, always mapping your boundaries. Consider the simple act of walking down a busy street. Most people are unaware of the choreography happening around them. The way they carry themselves, the spaces they claim or abandon, the way they meet or avoid eye contact. Every posture is a declaration. Every movement a signal. Those who are kind, polite, and unassuming often think invisibility is safety. But to the trained observer, invisibility is opportunity. It whispers, I am flexible, I am negotiable, I can be influenced. Then there are the voices in public, the ones that speak too quickly, too loudly, too apologetically. They may not realize it, but sound carries weight. A hesitant tone, a nervous laugh, a rush to fill silence, all of these are clues. They reveal internal patterns, vulnerabilities, and tendencies. And again, someone notices. They catalog it, they predict it, and then they exploit it. The first critical mistake in public is underestimating the power of first impressions. Every interaction, no matter how fleeting, sets a precedent. The cashier you smile at, the coworker you nod to, the stranger you let cut in line, all of these moments build a profile of you. And that profile, once formed, guides how people approach you in the future. They will test, probe, and push the boundaries you unconsciously expose. The second mistake is allowing frustration to leak into public behavior. Anger, irritation, impatience, these are not inherently bad, but when displayed publicly without control, they communicate instability. They tell the world that you are reactive, and reactive is exploitable. There is a subtle difference between being assertive and being uncontrolled. Assertiveness commands respect. Uncontrolled frustration signals vulnerability. Third, ignoring the subtle hierarchy in public interactions. People naturally assess social positions, even in mundane spaces. The person who holds eye contact without flinching, who stands tall even in crowded rooms, who speaks deliberately, is often granted authority without a word. The person who slouches, apologizes, or hesitates is often assumed submissive. It is not fair, it is not moral, but it is real. The social brain calculates these hierarchies instinctively, and those unaware are often manipulated without realizing it. Fourth, the danger of over-explaining. You may think clarity builds trust. You may believe that revealing your reasoning, your intentions, your motivations fosters understanding. And in private, perhaps it does. But in public, over-explaining signals uncertainty. It reveals that your decisions are negotiable, that your judgments are debatable, that your confidence is malleable. Those attuned to these cues immediately know how to influence your actions, how to bend your will, how to exploit your good intentions. Fifth, the peril of public dependency. Relying on others for validation, assistance, or reassurance in public is a silent invitation. When you look to someone else for approval, when you seek guidance in situations you could navigate alone, you communicate that your presence is incomplete without them. That dependency is an unspoken weakness, and the perceptive mind will test it. They will see how far they can push before you assert yourself, before you reclaim autonomy. Sixth, ignoring the narrative others construct about you. In public, stories are built from fragments. A single overheard comment, a fleeting interaction, a misinterpreted gesture, these can define you in someone else's mind. And once a narrative forms, it guides future behavior toward you. People do not need to interact directly to manipulate or judge you. They rely on the story they have crafted from observation, from instinct, from the subtle clues you provide. Awareness of this is not paranoia, it is strategic cognition. Seventh, failure to manage visibility and absence. There is power in both being seen and being unseen. To overexpose oneself is to invite judgment, criticism, and manipulation. To completely disappear is to signal irrelevance, vulnerability, or fear. The balance is subtle, and the skilled observer will watch how you navigate it. The one who masters this sees public life as a chessboard. Every presence is intentional, every silence calculated, every glance deliberate. Eighth, the trap of over-politeness. Most people are raised to believe politeness is a universal virtue, but politeness in public without discernment is easily exploited. Saying please when it is unnecessary, yielding space you could claim, excusing offenses that could be corrected, all these teach others your patterns. They communicate what you will tolerate, what you will forgive, what you will ignore. Politeness without strategy is surrender. Ninth, the cost of misreading social cues. Public spaces are rich with information. Tone, expression, posture, glance, every element conveys intent. Misreading a cue may seem harmless, but repeated errors build a map of misperception around you. People learn what you do not see, and they adjust their behavior to it. Awareness, then, is not optional. It is the currency of survival. All these principles converge on a singular truth. Public spaces are mirrors of perception, and perception controls opportunity. To act as though these rules do not exist is to walk blindfolded into a minefield. The patterns are subtle, the manipulations delicate, but they are constant. And those who recognize them first, who understand them fully, who internalize them, are the ones who move unharmed, who control their environment without exerting brute force, who are rarely caught off guard. Awareness transforms vulnerability into armor. Awareness allows deliberate action, measured responses, and strategic silence. Awareness teaches you to walk without giving away unnecessary signals. Awareness gives you authority in the subtle, unspoken language of public life. And once you internalize these lessons, the world shifts. The subtle provocations that once wounded you now roll off, harmless. The unspoken tests that once tripped you now reveal themselves before you even act. The manipulations that once trapped you now bounce off, deflected by nothing more than deliberate presence. Public life ceases to be a place of danger. It becomes a canvas. Each interaction is a brushstroke, each gesture a statement, each glance an opportunity. And you, aware, deliberate, unreadable, formidable, you are the artist, not the subject. Because understanding the 9 public mistakes is more than survival, it is mastery. And mastery, even in the simplest spaces, is freedom. You've learned the subtle ways public life teaches you weakness. Now, it's time to examine the internal echoes of those lessons. Because what happens inside you is as critical as what happens outside. The world observes, yes, but you respond, and your responses shape the patterns others exploit. There's a quiet moment in every person's life when realization strikes, not with alarm, not with drama, but silently, insidiously. A fleeting glance, a half-heard comment, an interaction that should have been trivial but leaves a residue of discomfort. That's when you see it. You've been unconsciously shaping the world to treat you a certain way. You've been building a map of vulnerabilities without knowing it. It starts with self-perception, the way you allow others to define your actions, the way you rationalize mistakes not as lessons, but as proof of personal inadequacy. You forgive too quickly, apologize too often, and allow small offenses to pass unchecked. Each moment reinforces the blueprint that others, intentionally or not, read and follow. Consider this: a simple exchange at a cafe. A stranger cuts in line. You hesitate. You smile politely. You let them go ahead. You think it's trivial, courteous. But what have you actually communicated? That your time, your patience, your presence is negotiable, that your boundaries are flexible, that your assertiveness is optional. The world notices. Predators, manipulators, opportunists, they notice first. And then comes the second stage, the testing phase. Not deliberate, not overt, but measured. A small push, a slight nudge. They are gauging your reaction, mapping your patience. Do you flare up? Do you hesitate? Do you rationalize their behavior? Every response feeds them data. Every micro-reaction is cataloged and referenced for future engagement. But the irony is this: your internal world, your mind, often convinces you otherwise. You tell yourself, they meant no harm. It's just a mistake. I'm overreacting. And you are. But only because you are assessing the situation through a lens of optimism rather than strategy. The world does not operate on optimism. It operates on probability, observation, and exploitation. The third stage is when repetition solidifies the pattern. Small slights become habitual. Minor manipulations are normalized. Your responses, automatic, conditioned, polite, set expectations. And then, suddenly, the world seems relentless. Why does this always happen to me, you wonder? Why am I always overlooked, taken advantage of, hurt? The answer is precise: because you taught them to expect it, because you created the roadmap. At this point, most people panic internally. They try to change external circumstances without altering internal structures. They hope for luck, for kindness, for fairness. But fairness does not correct pattern recognition. Luck does not undo repeated behavioral training. The only real solution begins inside, with awareness, with deliberate action, with internal restructuring. This is where subtlety becomes your ally. Public behavior is rarely about overt confrontation. It is about posture, voice, timing, and intention. You don't need to challenge every slightsome glance or assert dominance over every minor misstep. You need to train your internal compass to recognize manipulation, entitlement, and opportunity before it manifests fully. Then, when it arises, Your response is measured, precise, and unexploitable. Consider the power of controlled visibility. To reveal too much is to invite prediction. To reveal too little is to invite misunderstanding. The balance lies in intentional disclosure. In public, your gestures, expressions, and words should be deliberate. When a minor injustice occurs, you do not react reflexively. You assess, calculate, and respond strategically. This does not require cruelty, arrogance, or detachment. It requires discipline. Discipline in public interactions is rarely celebrated, rarely taught. People admire charisma, warmth, humor, and kindness, but they seldom honor deliberate composure, and that is precisely why it works. When you combine kindness with boundary awareness, empathy with internal regulation, generosity with strategy, you create an aura that is simultaneously approachable and untouchable. Next is the art of subtle deterrence, not confrontation, not aggression, just enough signal to redirect behavior without escalating conflict. A firm gaze, a steady tone, a pause before responding. These micro moments communicate strength without antagonism. Predators, manipulators, and opportunists often operate on instinct and habit. They exploit predictable patterns, change the pattern, become unpredictable. But unpredictability here is not chaos. It is deliberate control. The sixth danger most people ignore is emotional leakage in public. Every flicker of impatience, every sigh, every forced smile can betray more than you intend. The world reads micro-expressions far faster than verbal communication. One small crack in composure, and someone, anyone, who is observing will exploit it. The remedy is not repression, but awareness. Recognize the impulse, understand its trigger, and decide consciously whether it serves you to express it. Seventh is public negotiation of respect. Too often, people assume respect will be granted automatically. It will not. Respect must be established and maintained. This does not require loudness or aggression. It requires posture, consistency, and presence. Respect is the currency that determines the cost others must pay to exploit or manipulate you. Without it, every minor interaction becomes a battlefield where your attention, time, and energy are taxed without return. Eighth is controlling narrative in shared spaces. Every public interaction contributes to how others perceive you. A hurried apology may frame you as compliant. A flinch may frame you as weak. Your words, your gestures, your pacing, all form a story in the minds of observers. Understand that story, shape it deliberately, and you control perception before others can manipulate it. Ninth is anticipation. Recognizing opportunities for manipulation before they arrive is more powerful than reacting after the fact. Anticipation requires observation, reflection, and pattern recognition. It requires knowing the subtle cues, the context, the stakes, and your own responses. Once you develop anticipation, public life ceases to surprise you. You are no longer reactive. You are proactive. The final lesson in this part is deceptively simple. The world does not need to be hostile for manipulation to occur. The world is neutral. The world is opportunistic. It seeks patterns, rewards predictability, and exploits gaps. Your task is to exist within it consciously, to respond deliberately, to manage the impressions you leave, and to enforce your boundaries without apology. By integrating these insights, you no longer stumble blindly in public. You move with awareness, strategy, and intention. You recognize manipulative cues before they take root. You establish respect without aggression. You maintain composure without detachment. You navigate public spaces not as a passive participant, but as a conscious actor, fully aware of both external dynamics and internal responses. And in doing so, the 9 public mistakes, those small, seemingly harmless actions that invite manipulation, lose their power. Because once you internalize these lessons, once you merge awareness with strategy, once you assert your presence deliberately, the world adapts to you, not the other way around. You are no longer an easy target. You are no longer predictable. You are no longer exploited because of kindness, politeness, or hesitation. You exist publicly as an untouchable presence, deliberate, aware, and strategically protected. The path from vulnerability to mastery is subtle, long, and rarely acknowledged. But the reward is freedom, the freedom to move through public spaces without surrendering pieces of yourself, without offering your goodwill as currency, without teaching others how to exploit your nature. Mastery is quiet, invisible, and formidable. And it begins not with force, but with conscious awareness of every interaction, every gesture, every choice. The world rewards attention, but it punishes thoughtlessness. Every interaction in public is a thread woven into the tapestry of how others perceive you. One careless word, one unguarded gesture, one fleeting expression, and suddenly the pattern shifts. You're no longer merely present. You have given away a clue about your boundaries, your weaknesses, your predictability, and someone, somewhere, is already cataloging it. Consider the simple act of public disagreement. How often do you allow yourself to voice a differing opinion in a crowded room, at a meeting, in a conversation that matters? Do you bite your tongue to avoid friction, to preserve temporary peace, to keep others comfortable? If so, understand the price. Silence is misinterpreted as compliance. Restraint without intention becomes a silent invitation for manipulation. People test you not out of malice, but out of curiosity. Curiosity amplified by opportunity. They are searching for where resistance ends, where obedience begins. It starts small. Someone interrupts, someone cuts a corner in conversation, someone speaks over you. You let it pass. You smile politely, you adjust, you rationalize, and each small concession adds a brick to the wall others will climb over to take more. Predictability is the map that opportunists follow, and your good intentions, they are the bridges that lead them across. Public spaces amplify these dynamics. Social norms and expectations become tools in the hands of manipulators. A smile can be interpreted as weakness. Politeness can be seen as gullibility. Empathy can be twisted into obligation. The very qualities society praises, kindness, patience, generosity, are often the exact qualities that attract exploitation. And if you are unaware, you perpetuate the cycle. You reinforce the blueprint. You train the world to treat you exactly as it does. One of the most insidious forms of public manipulation comes through attention management. Some people seek control not through force, but through subtle guidance of your focus. They create distractions, shift topics, employ charm or guilt, and steer your energy where it benefits them. Most victims of this are unaware of the strategy at work. They attribute feelings of discomfort, irritation, or inadequacy to themselves, never realizing the external orchestration at play. The antidote is conscious observation. To navigate public life safely, you must first see clearly, not with cynicism, not with suspicion, but with clarity. Recognize who is acting out of genuine intent and who is maneuvering for gain. Observe patterns. track tendencies, and anticipate reactions. Then intervene, but not with aggression. Intervention in public spaces is an art. It is measured, deliberate, and strategic. It is the difference between reacting emotionally and responding intelligently. Boundaries become your invisible armor. They are not walls to isolate, but shields to protect. And they must be both internal and external. Internal boundaries govern how you process slights, interruptions, and provocations. They determine your emotional reaction before any external expression occurs. External boundaries communicate to the world where your limits lie. When consistently enforced, these boundaries establish a rhythm, a pattern others learn to respect or fear. Public manipulation often exploits the lack of internal boundaries. People sense hesitation, indecision, or uncertainty. They notice the gap between your thoughts and your words. They exploit the time it takes you to decide, the microsecond of doubt before your response. And the more you delay, the more control they gain. Mastery of public presence requires instantaneous recognition of these moments, combined with deliberate action. You must shorten the response window without sacrificing integrity. Then there's the art of emotional projection. People project their expectations onto you constantly. They assume compliance, kindness, or deference. They assume that a polite smile means agreement. They assume that calmness equals passivity. Most do not realize the assumptions are conditional based on their perception of your previous behavior. By controlling the signals you emit, you control the projection. You shape the narrative before it is fully formed in someone else's mind. Public life also exposes you to collective dynamics. Groups operate on unspoken rules and shared assumptions. A single act of conformity can reinforce expectations. A single act of defiance can destabilize them. Understanding group psychology is crucial. Manipulation is often amplified in groups as individuals feel emboldened by perceived consensus. And the person who absorbs this energy unprepared often becomes the target, not because they are weak, but because they are predictable. Observation alone is insufficient. Awareness must be coupled with strategy. You must decide what interactions matter and what can be ignored. Not every slight deserves correction. Not every disruption demands confrontation. Discretion is strength. Precision is power. In public, the most potent defense is selective engagement. When you conserve your energy for meaningful battles, you reduce opportunities for manipulation. You reduce the map that others can follow. A subtle but critical factor is public composure. The human mind processes visual cues faster than spoken words. One visible hesitation, one forced laugh, one involuntary grimace can convey vulnerability instantly. Mastery of public presence requires control over these micro-expressions. You do not become robotic. You become deliberate. Your expressions, gestures, and movements communicate intention, presence, and boundaries without requiring confrontation. Another essential principle is anticipatory adaptation. Public interactions are never random. Each person, each environment, each context carries its own pattern of behavior. Anticipate the likely scenarios. Predict manipulative strategies before they occur. Adjust your presence, tone, and behavior to reduce opportunities for exploitation. This is not fear. It is foresight. It is the difference between being reactive and being proactive. Negotiation in public spaces is also strategic. Every conversation, every glance, every gesture has an implicit cost and value. By understanding these dynamics, you learn to allocate attention, energy, and time efficiently. You create leverage not through intimidation but through presence, consistency, and intentionality. You become an individual who is neither dominated nor predictable. Finally, internal mastery is inseparable from external strategy. Public skill without internal control is hollow. Anxiety, overthinking, fear of judgment, and self-doubt leak into interactions and create exploitable patterns. By mastering your internal state, you control the signals you emit externally. Calmness, awareness, and deliberate engagement become your natural posture, your default presence. The culmination of these lessons is subtle transformation. You move through public spaces differently, not louder, not more aggressive, not colder, but more deliberate, more observant, more precise. You notice what others miss. You act when others hesitate. You speak when words carry weight. And you remain untouchable, not through power, but through awareness. By integrating observation, boundaries, emotional control, anticipatory adaptation, and strategic engagement, you neutralize the 9 public mistakes that most people make unknowingly. The world stops exploiting you because you stop teaching it to. You are no longer predictable, no longer reactive, no longer a target. Your kindness is intact. Your composure is intact. And your presence becomes a subtle but formidable force. In public, mastery is silent. It is invisible. It does not seek recognition, applause, or validation. It simply exists as an unshakable presence. And that presence ensures that the small daily manipulations, the interruptions, the slighted gestures, the veiled insults, the casual exploitations no longer leave marks. They bounce off, harmless, irrelevant, unnoticed. This is the ultimate lesson of public life. Vigilance, discipline, and strategy are your most potent tools. The mistakes others make are predictable, but your response is deliberate. The world may attempt to exploit, manipulate, or control, but you operate beyond their influence. Every small decision, every micro expression, every interaction becomes a statement of intent. And with that, you're no longer just navigating public life. You are commanding it calmly, silently, authoritatively, untouchable, and entirely in control. You'll notice it one day, not in a crowd, not during a confrontation, but in a quiet moment when you're standing somewhere all ordinary. You'll feel it, the stillness, the weight that used to sit on your chest, gone. You'll realize you no longer rush to explain yourself. You no longer shrink when someone interrupts. You no longer replay conversations in your head, wondering if you sounded strange or wrong or too much. You've stopped performing, stopped apologizing for your existence in public spaces, stopped offering your silence as a peace treaty, and that's when you understand what this was all for. The goal was never to outsmart the world. It was to stop giving it permission to define you, to walk into a room without bending yourself to fit its shape, to stand in your own rhythm, quiet, calm, self-contained, and let people feel the difference without you saying a word. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't argue or chase or prove. It simply is. You've learned that public life isn't about control. It's about energy. Who drains it? Who earns it? Who deserves it? You've learned that some people only understand boundaries when they collide with them, and others never needed a boundary to respect you. They saw your worth from the start. Those are the ones who stay. Everything else, the manipulation, the subtle digs, the fake laughter, the moments that once made you feel small, they lose their grip once you stop feeding them your attention. Because the truth is simple. The world mirrors your self-perception. If you move like you owe it something, it will keep collecting its debt. But when you move like you owe it nothing, it finally steps aside. So you walk now, not to be seen, but to exist fully in every place you stand. No performance, no mask, no fear, just presence sharp, quiet, undeniable. And in that silence, you realize something else. You were never weak. You were never naive. You were just trying to survive in a world that mistakes gentleness for permission. But now you know better. Now, every step, every glance, every breath in public is deliberate, controlled, yours. And that's how it ends. Not with revenge, not with noise, but with mastery. You don't need to win anymore, huh? You've already stopped playing their game.